Great. So thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. Our topic today is inclusive design for where you live. And just a little bit about Alberta SCILS. The Alberta Spinal Cord Injury Community of Interactive Learning Series, or AB SCILS, is a monthly webinar series supported by Praxis and led by representatives from Alberta Health Services, for example, at the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital, Foothills Medical Center, North and South Zones, as well as Spinal Cord Injury Alberta, including people with lived experience. Each webinar is co-designed by lived experience experts and non-lived experience experts so that both perspectives are shared. All webinars are recorded and posted in a dedicated YouTube platform and are open to the public. We anticipate AB SCILS will improve audiences' knowledge and empowerment through creating a sense of community, changing perceptions on disability, and improving social connectedness. So for today, for our professional experts, we have Ron Wickman. Ron Wickman is an architect, author, and activist who specializes in accessible architecture. He was born in Edmonton, Alberta, and in 1991 received his Master's of Architecture at the Technical University of Nova Scotia. He set up his own Edmonton-based practice in January of 1995. Ron's interests and expertise lie in accessible design that is accommodating the needs of individuals with disabilities. He also has a special interest in multifamily housing and urban and community planning. He provides consulting services for persons with disabilities and design services for projects focused on affording individuals with disabilities greater choices for independent movement. He is responsible for over 200 new homes or home renovation projects designed to accommodate residents with disabilities. Ron has firsthand lived experience with creating accessible environments because he grew up with a father who uses a wheelchair. He is the author of numerous articles and 2 books, Accessible Architecture, A Visit from Pops, and Accessible Architecture Beyond the Ramp. Ron has experience as an expert witness in cases involving persons with disabilities and has also been a guest speaker and participant in numerous sessions focused on accessibility, innovative housing, and urban and community planning. He also won over 25 awards for his design work. Next, we have John Harper. John is an architect by training, but works on the construction and development side of the industry. He is currently the VP of Development of the Canis Corporation, a building to apartment buildings in Calgary and interior British Columbia. He has a keen interest in accessible design and affordable housing. And last but definitely not least, we have our lived experience expert, Tracy Cook from Home Access Solutions. Tracy has worked in the construction maintainable industry for 40 years as a cabinet maker and finishing carpenter. Tracy also has a spinal cord injury and has been doing accessible reno since 2015. Next slide. And before we get started with the presentation, we just want to remind everyone about the Rehabilitation Advice Line. It is for Albertans who have an injury, orthopedic surgery, or neurological conditions, or who are recovering from COVID-19. It is an Alberta-based service, and you can access it by calling the toll-free number that you see on the screen. And the service is available 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And just as a informal disclaimer, the information contained in these webinars and related materials is not suitable for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please contact your medical practitioners for more information to see what is right for you. And again, the webinar is being recorded and will be made publicly accessible. Just some general housekeeping rules. Everyone will be muted. There will be a short presentation followed by a discussion where everyone will be invited to share their views and opinions. At this point, please feel free to activate your cameras. If you want to participate in the conversation, you can either request to speak in the chat box or wave your hand. You can also post your question in the chat box. To unmute yourself, you can press and hold the space key when you are called upon. And again, we will monitor the chat box for any questions or comments, or if you're experiencing any technical issues. There will also be some poll questions appearing on your screen during the discussion period. And again, you can change your name and keep your video off during the webinar. And I'll hand it over to Ron. Take it away.
Well, thanks very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. Can't see the audience, but welcome everybody that's tuning in. My name again is Ron Wickman, architect here in Edmonton, and a grandfather now of three great grandchildren. Just an image on the screen to your right is the front cover of my latest book, Accessible Architecture Beyond the Ramp. Next, please. In terms of my work, I do, as has been said, focus on work related to people with disabilities, and that really is at all scales. So it might be something smaller, a washroom modification for somebody with a disability, to a full-blown home renovation, to a new house, and then beyond that, duplexes, fourplexes. And I do a lot of work with not-for-profits as well, with social housing. In the past, I've done work for all levels of government and universities in terms of auditing existing buildings and looking to make them more accessible in today's day and age. Been doing a little bit of work with larger firms on larger projects, architectural projects, like the one in Calgary, the Cancer Hospital. And have been doing a little bit of work with municipalities and looking more globally at the way the city is laid out and how it can be made to be more accessible for all its residents. Next, please. And then just a quick visual of some projects that I've done in the past. Again, new houses, infill projects, sometimes in the suburbs, new houses as well. I do like to focus more on multifamily housing. In terms of group homes, they tend to be on the smaller scale, as I am a small practice, and I do enjoy working on projects that are for 6-10 bedrooms for residents with disabilities. Anything in the public realm or commercial realm tends again to have been activated because there's a real strong desire to make those spaces accessible. And recently, in the last number of years, I've been doing a lot of work with our Aboriginal communities here in Alberta. And that's been something that I'm enjoying very much and feel an important need to do that. Next, please. In terms of my own lived experience, I was only a few months old when my father was injured in a work-related accident, and he had a spinal cord injury. He was a paraplegic, and I only knew my dad as somebody who used a wheelchair. And I also grew up at a time when, in those days, in the 60s and 70s, there wasn't even such thing as a curb cut. So gaining access to the built environment was terribly difficult. And we had to strategize all the time in our travels to go to a restaurant or go to a movie theater or wherever we were going, even traveling outside of Edmonton. As it turns out, my dad also was a strong activist himself. Later in his life, he became a city councillor in Edmonton for 9 years. And for 12 years, he was a Liberal MLA here in Alberta. And that experience growing up around that atmosphere of activism also allowed me to meet many different people with many different types of lived experiences. So my worldview wasn't just from the point of view of looking at people as they used wheelchairs to get around, but I met many people who had low vision or were blind, people with hearing loss, and that gave me a much broader understanding. So when I entered architecture school, I entered specifically for that reason, to learn how I could make buildings more accessible. And now in practice, and having been in practice now for almost 30 years, I rely heavily on people with disabilities to help me to help me out when I'm designing various buildings. Next, please. And just quickly, for those of you that might not be too familiar with some of the terminology that we use in the world of accessibility, the first form of accessibility is something we call visitability, and it's the simplest form and easiest to achieve. And that simply means making a dwelling accessible for somebody to visit, meaning that there are no steps at the entrance level door. The hallways are wide enough to navigate through and get to a bathroom that, again, would be large enough for somebody to use and stay for a while. This image shows my father entering a house that we live in now, where we renovated our home and made sure that we eliminated the steps to the front door, and allowed my dad to often, and he really wanted to visit our house to see his grandchildren. So this was a tremendous thing that we were able to do. And the house itself is very sustainable. It's I feel like it's well designed. There's lots of great things about it, but by far the best thing that we did was the simple gesture of having the no-step entrance. Next, please. And in my time, I've learned too about the concepts of adaptability, and something that's unique to Canada is something we call flex housing, a term that was coined by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in the mid-90s. And the idea of adaptability or flex housing is that we design new homes and new dwellings so that they can easily accommodate future needs of ever-increasing aging population, and increasing population of people with disabilities, young and old. So things like building into a new house design an elevator shaft. You don't have to have the elevator installed. You can always install it later and use that shaft as closet space while it's there. Adding extra reinforcing in bathrooms so that you can add grab bars whenever you and wherever you want in the future. Next. And really the vast majority of my work in residential tends to be on the with this idea of a true full accessibility or inclusive design is a term that's often used in Europe and is gaining traction here in Canada. In the United States, they like to refer to it as universal design. And that really means that we're trying to design spaces and goods and products to accommodate as many people as possible in the best way possible. And nowhere can you see this better taken advantage of than with the idea of the bathroom being turned into a wet room. Again, not a very foreign idea to Europeans and Asians, but for us in North America, something a little bit different. But basically it just means that you waterproof the entire room, bathroom, and you can have a nice big shower area without any curbs. And that allows you to either stand in the shower, transfer from a wheelchair onto a bench, or just simply shower from a wheelchair shower. Next, please. And whenever I talk to people who are new to this and they're maybe looking at renovating their existing home or planning to build a new home, and they're thinking about accessibility or their future needs with aging in place, the three key issues are, as I've mentioned already, the no-step entrance. So build it right from the beginning with a no-step entrance, a bathroom that's designed to be the wet room, and really think carefully about that vertical access. So by far the best option is the residential elevator, which can be purchased or supplied and installed for as little as around $20,000. So in a new house design, new house construction, that is not a huge amount in the global costs of that home. Next, please. And then just to quickly show you a couple of examples that come from a client that I've had in the recent past. This was the result of the daughter in the family being injured in her travels, and she has a spinal cord injury. And we were able to look at the existing family home that she lived in. And the nature of the house actually allowed itself to be somewhat easily modified compared to many others. And in the image on the left, which is before, they provided a temporary metal ramp that got you into the house. From there, you had steps down to the basement or steps up to the main floor. So stair lifts had to be added in this case. The elevator was on the table, but they chose that not as an option. And then they turned the basement suite into a full-on accessible suite for the daughter. Next, please. And this is the bathroom for the daughter in the basement. So again, the parents will be able to take advantage of it should she move out, which I'll show you she did. But we were able to excuse me, modify this existing bathroom and build something that she could use forevermore. Next, please. And the idea of having the toilet centered in a space where there's space on both sides of the toilet for her to transfer. She had just been injured, so understanding her abilities was a little bit harder for her. So we did design this in a way that we could easily add the flip down grab bars on one or both sides of the toilet. Next, please. And then again, the shower area. Just here, I wanted to point out that showing that this is becoming a big market item. This is a big market in the United States, where the population of people over 65 is probably about 60,000 people, or sorry, 60 million people, which is more than the population of Canada. So they've worked hard at making it a very positive and beautiful space to be in. And one thing that's really helped is what we call the trench drain, which is at the bottom of the image here. So it's a drain that allows a singular slope to the drain and allows you to use different styles of floor tiles. And then the options open up for you in your own aesthetic for the bathroom. Next, please. And actually, a couple of years after the house renovation, the daughter moved out with her boyfriend into a condo complex. And luckily, she had learned so much from the renovation to the house that she was able to easily adapt her dwelling. The hardest part was finding a space that was easily adapted. So that took some time for her to find a space that not only was it easy to do in terms of a construction and cost point of view, but that the condominium board would be open to the changes being made. Next, please. And so here's her bathroom, not a whole lot different than what she has in the house, a little bit of a smaller space. And again, just shows that the choice in finishing products was different in this case, but well suited to the aesthetic that she has now. Next, please. And just making sure that space is open underneath at the sink for her, and making up that lost storage under the sink just above the counter there. Next, please. And the final slide is really in the multifamily, low rise to high rise apartments, condo facilities. One of the hardest challenges we find is just to make the outdoor space accessible for somebody who uses a wheelchair. So generally speaking, the doors are not well constructed for accessibility in mind. So they're well constructed to keep water out, but often we end up having to do some really tough renovations to the threshold at the doors, or add, in this case, they added a ramp to the door, and then there would be another ramp on the other side for the outdoor deck. So I'll leave that at that for now, and then I'll be happy to answer questions when the time comes. Thanks.
So thank you all. Am I unconnected there? I'm can go to the next slide. There we go. So my name's John Harper, and I'm with Canis Corporation, and we are a developer and contractor of affordable rental housing. And we incorporate a triple bottom line philosophy to everything we do. That triple bottom line philosophy includes sustainable building components, but also affordable and accessible design wherever possible. And Vivenda Group, just for your information, is our property management sister company there. Pictured here is one of our projects called Lumino, and it includes 3 high-rise apartment towers with 370 units in those 3 buildings, and 40 of those are adaptable in both 1 and 2 bedroom configurations. All 3 of these buildings were built green gold or platinum certification. Next slide, please. So I don't have lived experience, but it should be noted that my roommate at university was our previous speaker, Ron, and that was at architecture school. So from day one, I learned about visitability and accessibility from Ron, and it's stuck with me in my entire career. So Ron earlier mentioned visitability as the sort of simplest level of design to accommodate individuals with disabilities. So in all of our buildings, we try to achieve that. So we have a 0-step entrance at the front door, which is actually quite common. It's pretty much mandatory in high-rise buildings. We have elevators, of course, but where we're unique is that every single door in Lumino Park is 36 inches wide. That means that any resident in a wheelchair can go visit any other resident in the entire building complex and have access to their unit and the bathroom. Now, the bathrooms won't be barrier-free, but at least they're accessible to the people. So again, I really have to thank Ron for instilling that concept of visitability in me. Next slide, please. Now, the one, I guess, difference between what we do and what both Ron and our third speaker, Tracy, do is that we are we're in the affordable housing world where typically the units are by nature very small, and the tenants, of course, given that it's rental, change frequently, right? So we try to grapple with that, and we do so by careful design to make sure the units are at least have the spaces where necessary to get the 5-foot turning radius. But also, as you'll see in the following slides, we design the units so that we can easily modify them to suit the needs of a specific tenant when they arise. Next slide, please. So the first thing we do, as Ron mentioned in his slides, is we do all of our accessible suites are designed with the bathroom as a wet room. As he mentioned, that gives the ability to wheel into the shower. We have a sink that you can wheel under here as well. And in our newer buildings, we also put the laundry in sort of within that room. And it works well because that's actually a semi-wet function. It's designed in such a way that the water doesn't actually go onto the washer, but if the washing machine ever did overflow, it would actually incorporate the floor drains and get the water away. Next slide. So we also, in our newer buildings, utilize wall-hung toilets. What we find, and wall-hung sinks, as you can see in both these situations. What the toilets do is by getting the tank, for those who aren't familiar with them, the actual tank that's normally on the back of the toilet is actually embedded in the wall. So what this does, you gain about 8 inches of space in front of the toilet that helps with your your turning radius and mobility. On top of that is there's space underneath, which makes it easier to clean the units, and also gives you a little more swing space for the toes of the wheelchair. We give the option of a sink with drawers, as you see on the left. But for those who actually want to wheel under the sink, we give an option like the one on the right, where it's completely free of any cabinets underneath. What we've discovered by going with the cabinet with nothing underneath is there's actually becomes a shortage of storage in a typical barrier-free unit. So for those who do a front transfer and don't need the space beside the toilet, we actually have the ability to just simply attach a storage cabinet to the wall between the sink and the toilet, as you can see on the right. Next slide. Now you'll notice in those previous slides, because those are of brand new units, there's no grab bars shown. And what we do, what we've learned is that every tenant has a different sort of preference for where the grab bars should be. So we, and if you look at the slide on the left, this is not from one of our projects, but a project that I visited elsewhere. There's 6 grab bars in that photo. Only one of them actually meets the building code. So what we've learned is that there's a perfect example where someone wanted to suit their specific needs. They had grab bars in very, very specific locations. So what we do in our buildings is we put extensive blocking, like plywood, behind the drywall, so that a grab bar, so we have multitude of options for where the grab bars can ultimately be installed when the need arises. The other thing we notice, a lot of our tenants have conditions such as MS, where at the beginning they don't actually need any grab bars to begin with, but their condition may progress to the point where they want them in the future. Next slide. So into our kitchens, we do a number of features. The first of those is induction cooktops. And for those of you who aren't familiar with induction cooktops, it's actually unique technology where the element is only on when there's a pot on top of the element on the stove. So as soon as you remove that stove, it effectively turns the stove off, and it cools down very quickly, so that it's just a much safer stove. They're also very low profile. So you get a lot of knee space below the countertop in an induction cooktop. Now you'll see on the left, what we do, again, we find that some of our tenants prefer, sorry, go to the previous slide there, Terry. So if you see on the left, we give the tenant the option of removing that cabinet underneath the cooktop. And that's because we find some people value that low accessible storage space more than they do the ability to wheel under, and they're quite comfortable cooking to the side. And I'll also note we also go with wall ovens, and I'll speak more about that later. So next slide, please. So we're still, to be honest, we're still learning the best approach to wall ovens. The building code requires a side door oven, a side swing oven, like you see on the left, with a shelf below the oven so that you can remove your cookies or your turkey or whatever and put it on that shelf. The challenge we have with those is those ovens are actually remarkably hard to find, hard to get parts for them. And when they're very, very expensive. Secondly, they're actually quite large. So they're about 30 inches by 30 inches, where the oven on the right is actually 24 inches wide and only 20 inches tall. So it's about 50% smaller, which in an apartment context is important. Now, what we've done in this situation is we're actually, and we think we finally sourced an affordable side door oven that's 24 inches square. So in that case, we will remove the drawer that you see below the oven and be able to slide in a side door oven in that case. This is one case where simply the availability of material or equipment becomes a challenge in any design, frankly. Next slide, please. And then I'll just speak a little bit about adjustability. So in one of our earlier units is the upper cabinet. The slide to the left is the upper cabinet in one of our earlier projects, where if you can see there's some slots in the back of the cabinet. That allows this cabinet, simply by loosening the screws, it can be slid up or down to accommodate different needs of tenants. We've discovered, while it works, it's actually very hard to produce because it's just, even though it seems so simple, the manufacturers have trouble with it. We've discovered that it's actually easier to simply unscrew the upper cabinet and put it at a different height if needed by a tenant. In addition, these hydraulic shelves that pull down, as you can see on the slide to the right, also satisfy that need while still allowing some space to work underneath the cabinet, or to have things like a coffee maker or a toaster or what have you. We also we look at different options for creating the cabinet, or the countertop to be adjustable. And by adjustable, ours are not done on a daily basis. It's just simply when a tenant moves in, if they want it at a different height, we have some ability to adjust the height of that cabinet. You'll see in this one, actually, the tenant actually wanted storage space under the sink. So we actually, in that case, built a cabinet that slid in underneath the sink, and they had the workspace to the left where they could work. Next slide, please. As Ron mentioned, doors to the outside are often a challenge. In our case, we only build out of concrete, so we have a bit less of a concern for moisture coming in. But even so what you see there, the brown is in the middle slide. The brown is the interior of the unit, and the gray is the patio or the balcony. Even with all our best efforts, there's about 1.5 inch step to get up and over the threshold. So what we've done, you can see it on the right-hand slide. You can buy these simple aluminum ramps of various different heights that we can put both on the inside and the outside of the door to make that balcony more accessible. And it doesn't take up much space at all, actually. And we're actually experimenting with how we can build the inner one to have a matching flooring to the actual apartment, so it's less obvious. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So what I guess, and again, this is part of what Ron has sort of instilled in me, is we try to do all of this in a way that makes it look as homey and as comfortable as possible. So you'll see on the left, this is from our most recent building. We're actually doing these, and these are very small units, so there actually isn't room for a separate dining table, but we've created this work surface that's I think it's 29 inches, that allows for both a kitchen work surface, but also a dining table and maybe a games table or what have you for any tenant to use. Even seniors have trouble with stools because they can be taller and they're less stable. So by creating the lower surface, we're finding it quite popular. Also, finally, in our community garden that we have at Lumino, we've, working with spinal cord injury, created these barrier-free garden beds for our tenants as well. And those have proven to be very popular as well. So again, I'll be happy to answer questions later on, and I'll pass it over to Tracy.
Excuse me. Thank you, John. My name is Tracy Cook. I am, some people call me a lived experience expert. Thank you, Gary. I'm not an expert, but I have experience. My background is in construction. I'm a cabinet maker and finishing carpenter by trade. And 7 years ago, I broke my neck and was kind of forced to look at things a little bit differently. And as a result, I ended up learning a little bit about accessibility that I didn't know before. In 2014, I broke my neck and was kind of forced to look at things in a different light. I went to the Glenrose Hospital for 3 months for rehab after 3 months in the U of A hospital. And while I was in the Glenrose, I learned that there weren't many people out there that really knew what they were doing when it came to building and renovating property for people with disabilities. And so as a result, I couldn't find anybody that would build me a ramp. Everybody in Alberta was busy with major projects, and nobody really had time to build a ramp for Tracy. And so I ended up sketching out my own and designing it myself. And I had my family and my friends come over and install it for me. And as a result, I learned that not all ramps are created equal. But the ramp that I designed, I really liked it. I really am a strong believer that whatever a person builds should add to the property's aesthetic value and not take away. Most rental ramps are kind of tacky looking. They look a little industrial, and I try to avoid that kind of thing. When I left home, or when I left the hospital to come home, I had a significant other at the time, and she left me a couple of weeks before I left the hospital. So the stuff that the Glenrose had taught me to do, they did so with the idea that I was going to be coming home to somebody, and I would have help with a lot of things. So as a result, I didn't. So when I came home, I had to learn a lot of things and kind of do my own little renovations, as it were. The first thing that I had to do was find a way to get into the bathroom. I got home and my wheelchair wouldn't make it through the bathroom door. And having a background in construction, I had a lot of tools. So I went out to my shop and I got a Sawzall and I cut my bathroom door open and made it wider. That was about 6.5 years ago, and a couple of weeks ago I finally put a door up, and I finally took out the top foot of door that was hanging there from day one, and I put a barn door in my hallway to act as a bathroom door. And now people don't come over to my house and say, "Hey Tracy, you don't have a bathroom door," and so I think they feel a little more comfortable. I really didn't care up until then, so but they seem to. So that was my first big challenge. My second one was eventually I had to do my laundry, and I live in a bungalow, but my laundry is downstairs. So I had to find a way to do my laundry, and so I bummed down the stairs, and I threw a walker downstairs, and I kind of cruised around on that for a while. But I went down to do my laundry and threw it in and came out and finally finished the laundry and was on my way up the stairs, and I dumped my laundry basket. And after, throwing a little tantrum and getting over it, I went out to my shop again and I got some material and I put up a clothesline from the bottom of my stairs to the top of my stairs. And for a long time, I would do my laundry, fold it up, put it in the basket, and hook it onto the laundry line, the clothesline, and then bum up the stairs and pull my laundry up after me. That was okay, and eventually I found that I could carry the baskets, so I finally could get rid of that clothesline. And so what I discovered was that not all things are expensive. there's a lot of things that we can do that aren't going to cost a lot of money. And a good example is my clothesline. Getting into my bedroom was a challenge because the wheelchair that I'd gotten was too long, and I couldn't make the corner at the end of my hallway to go into my bedroom. So that was easy to fix. I put up some offset hinges, which actually give you 2 inches more clearance when you go through your doorway, and that was a quick fix, so to speak. I didn't have to cut the wall out and widen my door. It really worked quite well, and to anybody who has trouble getting through doorways, usually running into the door, the hinges are expensive by hinge standards, but they're still under $100, and you don't have to rip your walls out. So it's a quick fix, and I recommend that to just about everybody. If you want to clear your knuckles when you go through the doorway, put up some hinges. And that's one of my, I'm a real big fan of universal design. I like it. The problem is that when we come home from the hospital, what we sort of need is we need personal design. We all have that personal little thing that will work for us, but won't work for Joe Blow, but it'll work fine for us. And a good example is my shop. I have a little ramp that goes up to my table saw, so I can push plywood through my saw now. And it's just one quick example. My bathroom was another. I kind of had to. I finally put in a wheel-in shower in my bathroom after a few years, and I was fortunate though that I could actually transfer from my wheelchair onto a bench in a tub. A lot of people don't have that luxury, and they are kind of forced to go out and put a wheel-in shower in. And what I would suggest to most people is, find out if there are any grants that are applicable to you, like available to you. I know the ramp grant is $7,500, and you can use it twice, so that's $15,000 that you can put into your house. It doesn't go as far as you might like it to, but it's a good start, and it's somewhere that you can go to actually get a little bit of help. A lot of us come home, and I know when I came home, I was 6 months behind on all my bills. I'd lost a lot of money because the work that I was doing at the time, I had a lot of money invested in it. So my financial situation was pretty dire, and I didn't have a lot of money to spend. So, that's kind of how I ended up in the business that I'm in, which is basically accessible renovations. And I needed to pay my bills, and because carpentry was my background, and it kind of fit well with me. Installing your ramp, for example, not all ramps are created equal. Some people will come out of the hospital and not be able to push themselves up a ramp that's built to code. That 1 inch for every 12-inch rise that you see as a building code. If you have very little mobility, it's not going to help you a lot, and sometimes a lift is going to be the answer. And right now, the way that inflation has kind of worked out, building material is very expensive right now. So I just put in a lift for a customer. It's a porch lift, and I actually put it in for less money than what it would have cost to put a ramp in. Which that's kind of unusual for me. In the past, it's been the other way around. I've been able to, build something quite quickly to get someone in. But as it worked out in this job, anyway, the lift was much cheaper. Another thing I would recommend to most people that use a wheelchair is, tear that carpet out. It's just going to be a real challenge to wheel through all day long. My carpet was shag carpet. It seemed like it was 100 years old, but it had to go. And I'm actually in the process of installing my flooring right now. I have plywood on half of my house and the old flooring on the other half, and I'm in the process of putting new flooring in. anyway, as far as that goes, I recommend that you get rid of that. But anyway, your kitchen. Everybody's a little bit different when it comes to their needs and their wants in their kitchen. I'm fortunate I can stand at the kitchen sink and I can do my dishes. But I did do a couple of things when I first got home, and one of them was to take all of my dishes from the upper cabinets and I put them in the lower cabinets. I have a lazy Susan in each corner. My pots are on one and my dishes are on the other. And so it's quite simple for me just to take my dishes out and put them away. It's pretty straightforward and very inexpensive. And so, as far as dishes go, I do have a dishwasher, but I can only actually reach about half of it. So I usually do my dishes in the sink. So that's just something that, like I say, everybody's going to be a little bit different. And I guess what I'm saying is when you get home, it's kind of important that you realize that don't spend any money that you don't have to, unless of course it's an insurance claim and it's not really your money. I suppose, well, of course it's your money, but I had a friend that I was in the hospital with, and they spent over $100,000 renovating their home so that she could go home and have accessibility in the home. And they got home, and 6 months later she was walking. And so I suggest to you that maybe you spend a little bit of time realizing what may or may not be permanent in your life as far as accessibility goes, and just spend that money when you have to. And of course, you'll need to have a ramp, because I don't think the Glenrose will let you go home unless you have a way into your house. I think I kind of got away with a lot of things when I left the Glenrose, because I was going home anyway. I was kind of tired of that hospital. And as wonderful as they were, I was just ready to go home. Door thresholds. I have or threshold ramps, I guess I want to call it. I have a company that builds them for me when I have a customer that needs them, and they kind of tuck underneath the door on either side, and they're really all that you have to deal with once they're installed is the little bump in the middle, which means you do have to have a certain amount of function and a certain amount of strength, but it's fairly minimal. They work really quite well. I think they're awesome, and I build them out of checker plates, so you hear that little zip when you go over them. It sounds kind of cool. But I would say to everybody, install them, and they're so nice to have, and it just means by the end of the day, when you're tired of going through potholes with your wheelchair and jumping off curbs, and you're just tired of those bumps and those. They're just nice to not have to go over a transition of some sort, and it's just really nice that once you get home, it's a little bit easier to wheel around and not have to deal with that. As far as accessible vanities go, my experience as a cabinet maker helps me there. I build them in my shop, and I don't really need one. The first thing I did in my bathroom is I put in a stool, and I transfer from my wheelchair to the stool. But most people need some sort of an accessible vanity. It's just way nicer when you can wheel underneath your vanity and clean yourself up, rather than have to ask for help. And asking for help can be difficult sometimes, and I'm probably the worst offender for not doing that. But I do totally understand it. And the other, let's see if I missed anything here that I wanted to cover. And I think I've pretty much covered it. I do want to really stress, though, that I think it's really important that you make your home as functional as you can for yourself, as cheaply as possible. And you'll figure out what your needs are, and then after that you can deal with what your wants are. And I really hope that everybody has some luck with that and gets a break. And please take care. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. So thank you, Tracy, Ron, and John. We are now going to be opening up to any questions or discussions that you may want to have related to the topic. The discussion session will be recorded, so please feel free to ask or share anything relevant, and please be respectful of other people's thoughts and perspectives during the discussion. And again, a reminder that the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on Spinal Cord Injury Alberta's YouTube page sometime later this week. So to start it off, we do have a question already in the chat box, and this question is for John. It's regarding the wall-hung toilets. So every issue I've ever had with toilets is fixed via the tank. So does a wall-hung toilet mean that access requires tearing down the wall to change a gasket? And the question comes from Karen Brown.
Sure, I can try to answer that. I'm not a plumber, but we have, so the same, we have a plumbing division in our construction company, and they are also the ones who maintain the toilets. And I can honestly say I've never heard them complain about the maintenance of these toilets. What there is behind the buttons, if you look at the buttons, there's probably an 8-inch by 8-inch panel that actually comes off, and that gives access to everything that's within the wall. You're correct about the gasket. There is a gasket between the toilet itself and the stuff behind the wall, but that can be accessed by removing the actual toilet from the wall, and it can be replaced. But it's a more rigid connection than the wax seal on a typical toilet. So I guess to answer the question is it's all can be done from the front.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for the presentation. Question I had was, and maybe this might be more for Ron and for Tracy, but like say I'm an interpersonal hospital and I want to, do something to my house, but with your thought of adjustability, so that, once they figure out what kind of injury they have and their strengths and where they're kind of going to go and what they want to do, what would be the most important things to focus on for adjustability? So when I'm saying, like, for example, the certain walls that you should reinforce so that you can put grab bars in there wherever you want in the future, or in the kitchen so you can put cabinets anywhere you want. Well, like, is it, making sure putting in reinforced walls? Would that be one of the big things for you in like bathrooms and kitchens, for example? Maybe we'll start with Ron.
Yeah, I was everything hinges on the bathroom in my opinion. So I think what Tracy raises though is the real issue of not always having the luxury of being able to do a full-on renovation to your bathroom. So in my work, it is actually usually insurance related. So I do a lot of work for the Workers' Compensation Board here in Alberta, and they are very good about modifying homes for injured workers. So typically when I'm involved, we are talking about a full-on bathroom renovation. And so I always say, well, let's just make sure we clad all the interior walls of the bathroom with 3/4 inch plywood. And then forevermore, you can put a grab bar wherever you like. Now, for somebody like Tracy commented, where you're coming home from the Glenrose and you're trying to make it work. And I witnessed this with my own father when he had a 1967 so-called wheelchair accessible house built. But I saw him as he was aging, trying to add grab bars around his bathtub area. And, he had to try to find the wood studs to connect to. And the grab bars were always misplaced, but they were solid, so I kept bugging him because he did get hurt on the job. I kept saying, Dad, you know, the WC will pay for a renovation to your bathroom. And he fought it for as long as he could, but eventually he gave in. And I like to share his experience because he as a very independent person, didn't want to cause a lot of problems, didn't want to ask for a lot of help. But once he used that shower area that we built for him, he just said, wow, I should have been doing this like 30 years ago. You know, like he realized that all that effort he put into getting in and out of a bathtub for all those years would have been so much better if he would have just done it a long time ago. So it is if you have the means, it's great. If you don't, it does become a bit of an issue.
And I agree with you, Ron. When you're talking about new construction, it's a totally different thing than a renovation. The new construction, you can generally, plan whatever your needs are for the time. And the bottom line, when it comes to a wheel-in shower, the ones that I try to buy, it doesn't matter if I retile a bathroom or if I just install a pre-built shower. The showers that I buy come with 1/2 inch plywood mounted behind the whole thing, so you have that option to put a grab bar wherever you want in those. Sometimes though, for the rest of the bathroom, if it's an existing bathroom, sometimes it's easy to find those studs, but sometimes you just have to cut to the chase and cut the drywall out where you need it, put backing behind it, and then reinstall the drywall. And sometimes that's just the bottom line.
Okay, thank you guys. Just quickly before, because sometimes people have to jet off, we have just 2 quick questions that we'd like people to answer. It takes only about 30 seconds, and then we'll get back. We saw some more questions in the chat box here that we'll get to right away. Just answer these first.
Maybe while everyone is answering the poll questions, I will read out the first question in the chat box. And the question is from Sam, and the question is for John. And the question is, if I've calculated right, the Lumino building has about 11% adaptable units. Do these get held for the people who need them?
So to answer that, it should be 10%, but because that's actually what our requirement is. And I meant to talk about this in my talk, but you raise a very good question. So the challenge with rental housing is that people typically, we as the property manager never know when they will leave, and thus we never know when we'll have units available. Now, to some degree, we know when their leases expire, but people often sign an extension for 3 months or a year or whatever. So it's very difficult to match the immediate need of someone wanting an apartment, say right now, they'd be looking for March 1st with an empty unit. So we have, but we work with Accessible Calgary, and even like Spinal Cord Injury Alberta is our tenant in the building. So they sometimes contact our property managers to see what availability is. But the short answer is it's difficulty, but we try to make it work. And then I noticed the next question, I'll just answer, talks about new builders or developers currently building new accessible rental housing. I will add that if it's in any way receiving funding from the CMHC or as part of the National Housing Strategy, it probably has a similar requirement that we do for that 10% component to be accessible in some capacity.
Just to add to that, John, my experience too has been with new builders, developers of multifamily. The focus tends to be on senior living, and CMHC has a program where if you design to a certain standard of, they have both sustainability and accessibility, then you have easier access to grant funding, and so on. So I'm not really aware of builders, developers that are focusing on accessibility from sort of a younger person's point of view. They're sort of taking advantage of this clear, I don't want to call it a trend, but just clear statistic that our population is aging, right? So all of this is going to change the map of the way we build, I think. It should have actually changed the map 30 years ago, but we always are slow to catch on, I guess.
Yeah. Hi, Ron and John. My name is Guy, and I work with Spinal Cord Injury Alberta. I posted that question because there's a group that is looking at trying to get young adults out of long-term care facilities back into the community. And I think part of the problem is what developers, building owners, would you think would be more accommodating towards adapting their current buildings to make them units accessible and have on-site support services? Who would you contact?
What city? Or you're in all of Alberta?
We're going the whole province.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, in Edmonton, the probably the most open to all of this has been Greg Christensen and Christensen Developments. Again, they tend to focus on senior living. So the issue, I think the issue with younger people with disabilities is the development world wants to see statistics. They want to see like, what is the market for that? And that's a really tough one. All I can tell you is anecdotally, more and more of my work has been generated towards creating more accessible housing for young baby, like children being born with disabilities like cerebral palsy. And so this is a real thing, but I can't tell you what the numbers are. And it's tricky because it's a matter of educating everybody to understand that, some of this stuff is pretty easy to do. So it should just become commonplace. It shouldn't be sort of specialized types of housing. And that's the real trick, right? That's another one of those hurdles we need to get over.
So question for you, John. In those rental accommodations that are adapted, as the building management company, do you still turn a profit? Is it something you're losing money on? Is that reason why developers may not do this?
It absolutely is a challenge to make money, but we have, like, at the end of the day, we're financed by the banks, and the banks we have to be viable in order to keep the funding from the banks. Those units they don't cost much more to build. I mean, they do. It's probably about 10%, but and the rents really depend on, like, they vary greatly, right? But I would say the actual cost of doing the adaptation, there is a real cost there. And we do actually try to get the ramp grants for those. I don't know if those, for those of you not familiar, it's a grant up to, I believe, about $7,500 to adapt a unit. Now, in the case of the house and the more extensive renovations that Ron and Tracy speak of, that's not a lot of money to do the work. But in the case of removing some cabinets, adjusting some plumbing lines or whatever, it certainly helps us, and that makes it doable for us.
Well, the beauty of that, John, is that you are starting with the initial structure.
Yeah.
so there's nothing to change there. It's and that's got to help.
See more questions in the chat box here. We got one. Who would I connect with to sort out how to build a multi-suite home for spinal cord injury disabled people? So I'm guessing you're just looking for like an architect or somebody that you could talk to, Dustin? Sorry.
I'll just give my 2 cents, I guess.
Okay. Yep.
Terry, can you hear us?
Oh, can now. Yep.
Okay, it's Dustin. Dustin's mom. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just like, I'm still in the hospital, but I'm looking. I want to build like a 5-unit place for like quadriplegics, paraplegics, something that's self-sustaining. And I don't know who to contact as a builder to like where to start. I'm like, I have no idea, Terry.
Well, I would suggest that you talk to, first of all, someone who can design it for you. Because there's no point talking to a contractor unless they are an all-inclusive contractor who can design it and build it, and then, you know, and go from there. But first of all, you need to know what you want and what you need. And like there are a lot of different forms of adaptability. Like I think the best, unless you know who's moving into those units, you really don't know what kind of function they have and what kind of extras they're going to need. So you're looking basically for a universal design from
Exactly.
someone who can do that for you.
But would you have any insight on who I would contact just to start? Like, I have a design that I have in mind, but to put it on paper with codes, and like I'm in Calgary, so I don't know. I haven't found anybody that does this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just thinking about your question. It seems to me that there's kind of three avenues that one could go down. One would be to go straight to somebody like myself, an architect, and try to get that person to help you navigate through all of this. The other, which is probably more common, is to try to find a builder who again could help you get started. Eventually the builder would need to bring in the architect designer to do up the necessary drawings to meet code and so on. The third option, which I'm not really aware of anybody that can help you, is more like a consulting group. That would be, here's a great business model for anybody tuning in, but to have an actual consulting business where you are that stop for people to get a handle on all of this, so that consulting firm would help you research grants, find out what grants are available, target areas that you're thinking of building in, what the logistics of that are. There is a group in Edmonton here that does that a lot with the affordable and sustainable architecture. So a lot of not-for-profits, for example, will go to them to help them navigate. So, and obviously it's a paid thing, right? So they pay them to help them write the grants and help them first gain the architect, and then work with the architect to get the drawings done, and then get the builder involved and get the project done. So I certainly had that experience here in Edmonton with an affordable housing project that I did for people who would have been homeless.
Is that Communitas, Ron?
Yeah, Communitas. Yeah.
Would you consider Calgary?
Would I consider I do a lot of work in Calgary myself. Yeah.
Well, then you're okay.
Yeah. I'll give a plug to Ron. He's the go-to guy for the design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't give me a hammer. I'm not good with that.
Okay, we'll give you a pen.
Yeah, yeah.
But sorry, someone had a question there?
Go ahead, your mom. Ask a question.
So how would I get a hold of you?
That's Ron.
Are you talking Ron?
Yes.
Yeah,
you.
I think my website, my email address. I don't know if
Okay.
I'm supposed to be sharing it or it's already shared with in this
Ron, you can
webinar.
share it if you want. I was going to post it underneath the YouTube video for
Yeah.
future
It's
anyway,
pretty,
but maybe unless you don't want me to.
it's pretty
but-
simple. It's rwickman@shaw.ca.
R. Whitman.
Yeah. And
And your
at
website's ronwickman.com.
and
At
then,
Shaw.
yeah, I
Or-
don't, I honestly don't know how to say my website, but it's on my, like when I send you an email, it's there, so you can click onto it.
Okay.
But
Thank you so much.
So
oh, you're welcome.
if I can comment just further on that, those general questions. One of the, like it's actually relatively easy to design a building. It's harder to operate one. And I think it's, I think it was Guy that talked about both providing the housing and the supports. The supports are the really challenging part of it. Our buildings ours are all independent living, so the individual has to have has to be fully independent to live in our buildings. Now, that said, some of the 2-bedroom units, it might be a couple and the couple is the support. But there are groups out there, like Accessible Calgary is the one that comes to mind, that would be also a good place to start, because they would actually be well connected in the, if they're not doing it themselves, they would know who are some of the people that could provide those supports.
Awesome. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
And sorry, just to add to that too, one more thing. And Terry, you might be able to speak to this, but there is a unique project in Edmonton, which is Creekside. So you lived there for a while, but Creekside had, just going along what John mentioned about the support, Creekside has about 10 units that are fully accessible for people who are quadriplegic, and they formed their own support model, kind of outside of the norm, so to speak, and it's very, very successful.
That's what we want.
I'm sorry?
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that one, I don't know much about that, the support part of it, but I did earlier in the days when the person who sort of instigated is Larry Pempite, who used to be with spinal cord injury here in Edmonton, and he approached the developer and said, look, we can, if you build 10 of these, we'll make sure they're always full, kind of thing. And yeah, I think they've done quite well for themselves. And Terry, you weren't there that long, but you probably have some insight into that as well.
Yeah, it was, it's a condo complex with 3 buildings, and they had their own care program that you could get into if you wanted to. So they hired their own nurses and their own care staff that would come up to the different people's rooms at a lot of times that you had to schedule. And I actually bought one of their non-accessible rooms and made it accessible, and they were very accommodating. So yeah, no, I can't remember, Alicia, if there was that other group we were looking at here in Calgary. It's kind of like that. What was the name of it? Trying to click.
Inclusio?
Yeah, and it sounds kind of like that's kind of similar. I haven't looked into them too much, so don't quote me on that, but it's another avenue to look at. Just to get some more questions, and sorry, Dustin, to put you off there. Would you, and Dustin, yeah, sorry, would you be able to mute your mic, sorry?
Yeah, just unmute them. It's on the top. Yeah, that left one.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Is there a list of, and this is a tough one, this is kind of what I was thinking with having Tracy in here, is there a list of good, reliable contractors in Alberta who do accessible renovation? We are looking to renovate the house and are concerned about who to contact and who can be trusted to finish the job and finish it correctly. You guys probably have a lot of experience dealing with this kind of thing. So whoever, Tracy, maybe if you want to jump in first, and Ron, who's probably dealt with a lot of contractors along the way.
As a matter of fact, right now I'm doing a reno that was done by a contractor a few years ago, and it's a huge redo, and nobody dislikes doing renovations than me, especially like, and it was really quite a mess. It's kind of a shame, and it's just a really sad story, and I don't have time to get into it right now, but the one thing that you want to know about your contractor when you do contact them is, what do they know about accessibility, and what are they willing to learn about accessibility at the same time. I hate to keep going back to this, but everybody's accessibility is a little bit different. Everybody's function is a little bit different, and that makes their needs a little bit different. Most contractors who are good at what they do are very, very busy. And as far as who should you contact, I think there are a lot of good contractors out there, but I think you really have to do your research and look into them quite closely. I don't know if that helps or if it just kind of muddies the water, so to speak, but I also don't want to put my foot in it.
Tracy, I think you made some great comments, and it's hard. It's a bit of a leap of faith with the contractor, but I think Tracy hit on it with the willingness to learn, and the best contractors that I've worked with didn't necessarily come out of the gates with me thinking, oh, these guys are going to be awesome, they know exactly what they're doing. They were like most contractors I meet, they don't have the experience with accessibility that you would hope for, but they pull through because they put in that extra effort to really try to appreciate and understand the issues at hand, right? So for me, what I've been trying to communicate to people, whether you're the builder or the consumer, is try to learn as much as you can about the process. So too often I get people phoning me, homeowners, saying, we have this house with 3 steps at our front door because the builder told us the code doesn't allow us to have a no-step entrance. Well, that's completely false. So that builder just said something, either thinking that they know what they're talking about, or they just didn't want to go there.
Right.
And so if you don't know, as a consumer, if you don't know that that's just false information, then you just rely on the builder to think that, okay, well, a person knows what they're talking about, so I'll just go along with it. So it's up to all of us to try to learn as much as we can. And I know that's really daunting and hard, especially if you've just been injured and you're new to this whole world. It's very difficult, right? But my experience has been, I find a really good contractor, and within about at least 5 years, I more or less lose that contractor to bigger projects. So if there's just small washroom renovations or little small jobs, they're so good that they just become in huge demand, and then I lose them. So I'm always constantly looking for contractors that are willing to take on, especially the smaller jobs. Those are the ones that I find actually a lot harder than the bigger ones.
Right. And I will mention really quickly is never pay a contractor up front, not 100% up front. Never, ever.
But you could pay the architect up front.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is that if they're able to talk to you right away and get on your project right away, then that's not a good sign. And this is, for newly injured people, and a lot of us have probably dealt with this as we've gone along our process. I think it definitely pays to start that research right away. It's not necessarily what you need to do to your house, but at least looking for the right person to help you with that house. And that's, like you said, doing your research and finding somebody, because, if you find somebody good, they might be busy. So you don't necessarily need them right now. You're in the hospital, but you might need them in 4 to 6 months. Well, hopefully that's something that can work for you, kind of thing. The last question, Dale isn't here anymore, so I don't see him here. Was there anybody else that had any questions for our awesome presenters?
Go ahead, John.
I can comment on just Dale's question. He's asking where to get the fold down cupboards.
Oh, yeah.
We actually get ours from the cabinet maker. So I don't actually know where they get them from, but a place we go to for grab bars and what have you, and those small threshold ramps, is a place called 101mobility.com. And they're a neat, I don't know if Tracy or Ron, you've used them, but it's a franchise that they have a store in Calgary, and I find them very helpful. I mean, this is precisely what they do, is they help people realize these things.
That's great that you mentioned that, John, because that's been a big missing piece in all of this, is finding access to the various products, or even knowing what options you have out there. And I was going to make a comment about this piece of equipment that you put into an upper cabinet so you can pull the shelves out and down. The company that I go to has a place in Edmonton and Calgary. It's called Richelieu. Which is probably where 101 might go to get there to get that. But yeah, it's hard to just Google, flip down cupboards or something, and who knows what you'll get. So yeah, that's something that's really tricky. And 101 is I think they're fairly new in Calgary, but that's that's sort of back to a place where you could get a lot of information from one place. And I think that's been a big missing piece, literally for 50 years. Because I can tell you that that's what my dad was trying to start many 50 years ago. So, around 50 years ago. And it just never came to be, right? Because I don't think the market demand was there, but clearly it's here now. And so you're going to see a lot of these businesses popping up, which is a good thing. Finding the better ones will be the harder thing.
I just typed their
go,
website.
John.
I just typed their website into the chat.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I see that. I see a couple people just for the pull down shelves. Some people said that IKEA has some decent ones, as well as one of our guests had purchased theirs on Amazon, which is good to know that they had those as well. It actually made me think a little bit, and Tracy's thing about figuring out your ability and figure out what you need and figure out what you want. One of the first things I did, I was still in the hospital at the time, but just went and wheeled around IKEA and started playing with tables and cupboards and stuff with my, quad hands, and being like, well, this doesn't work. Well, this doesn't work. One of the things I love and have a lot of in my kitchens is pull out drawers, even in my cupboards, open the door and pull out a drawer. And a lot of that started from my first days in IKEA, where there's all these, because, IKEA always been that a little bit interesting, but one of the big things they always had was those pull out drawers with little cutouts, so it doesn't fill the whole space, so you can fit your hand in easily. And so with me, quad hand, put my hand in, because there's a nice little cutout, pull the whole drawer out. Now I don't have to reach into the cupboard. So, if you can get out to home shows. So another thing I always did was go out to home shows, because there's just all this kind of cool stuff out there. One of the things that I have in my kitchen that I love the most is called a pot filler that goes behind my stove, and you can pull it out and fill your pots. So you don't have to take them from the sink to the stove to fill up all your pots. And I also have my coffee maker there. So I just pull it over to my coffee maker, fill up my coffee maker and my kettle. So that was found at a home show, not at an accessibility store, not at IKEA, not at, that kind of stuff. So you find that stuff, but you got to go out and just play around and get to know what's out there.
Yeah, the only thing I'll suggest is, if you're going to go with something online like Amazon or something like that, give yourself lots of time so that you can actually get the product and see if it is what you want. just, you know, don't order it to be here on Friday because you have the plumber coming to install it on, you know, Friday afternoon, sort of thing.
So just quickly, and I'll go back to it. Thank you again for our presenters who did an amazing job. And I like the comments on people said about sharing your, you know, you guys are very committed and actually care about this stuff, which just goes a long way. And usually the architects and contractors that do care are the ones that do the best. So thank you guys so much. Just a reminder, I do host a post-webinar chat next Monday. If anybody just wants to continue the conversation, share what they've done, ask questions. The presenters may or may not be there depending on their schedules, but it's open obviously to everybody, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys there. Yeah, I just 1 second. One last, just making sure, just a thank you. Perfect. Any last thoughts before we sign off, guys? Nope.
Not really. What I would like to do though before I leave is I want to leave you with my my email, Ron, if you can hang around.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so this will be posted on YouTube, and I will put Ron's website so that he doesn't even know up on the underneath the YouTube channel, as well as Tracy. Would you like me to put your business contract?
Sure.
Business title up there, just so people can find it if they want to. Perfect. All right. Well, on that, see you everybody. And next month's webinar is on well, physical therapy. So it's going to be an interesting one. And